When I was doing my undergrad, I was a member of the University Philosophy Club, and during one of our sessions, we had a guest speaker from the education department talk about philosophy of modern education. And he began by saying something that actually put all of our backs up for a moment. He said our generation was far more conservative than his generation had been. Now, we were all very socially liberal. Economically, we were social democrats with maybe a communist thrown in. And here was this boomer professor telling us that we were the conservative generation. But then he explained he meant that we were far more concerned with the social safety net, with protecting the environment, with the well-being of the elderly, with job security, than the very freewheeling capitalism of Reagan and Thatcher, Mulrooney, and the Clintons and Chrétiens and Blairs that had followed. Now, we relaxed because this was true, but we also had to really rethink the descriptors that fit our politics.
Obviously, the term conservative can mean wildly different things depending on what one is trying to conserve. Now, some people have tried to account for this by breaking apart libertarian left and libertarian right, authoritarian left, authoritarian right, and create all kinds of different categories. But they still make the mistake of assuming that conservative is the same thing as right wing. The term right wing comes from those who sat on the right side of the aisle in support of the monarchy, the ruling class. Now, it does make some sense to call Reagan and Thatcher right wing in the sense that they gave a lot of wealth and power to our ruling class, but it doesn't make much sense to call the neoliberal era they ushered in conservative when it's had, for starters, all the biggest crashes since the Great Depression. Now, I'm certainly not what you would call a social conservative. I'm completely in favor of women's rights, LGBTQ rights, but I also know a lot of young people who want to get married and have kids, which is a kind of social conservative value. And they're not doing so because the economy is too precarious and they can't afford to. Today I consider myself a socialist, but there are still many aspects of my socialism that are very conservative. For instance, I don't think the best way to deal with Jeff Bezos' wealth and power is through taxation and bureaucracy. I think the best way to deal with it is to change the workplace to be something more like the John Lewis Partnership in Great Britain. The 85,000 workers of the John Lewis Partnership democratically elect a workers' council every 3 years. And when the company turns a profit, as it usually does, some gets reinvested into the company to continue its success, and some gets redistributed to the entire workforce that produced that profit in the form of a company bonus. That's in keeping with the centuries-old tradition of groups like the Knights of Labor, who considered themselves Republican Americans, arguing for self-governance in politics and self-governance in the workplace, as well as individualist thinkers like John Dewey, John Stuart Mill, and Bertrand Russell. Today it's a bit shocking to see figures like Jordan Peterson arguing for hierarchical corporate capitalism as the Western individualist tradition, and Pierre Poilievre trying to sound anti-establishment and working class by posing with the truckers' convoy while advocating right-to-work legislation and Clintonite welfare reform. They're certainly far more right-wing than I am, but I'm not sure they're more conservative. I would love to see a class-conscious conservatism that offered real 21st century solutions for a decentralized, vibrant, working-class society. Conservatives could take the advice of Adam Smith and Henry George and replace a myriad of regressive sales taxes with a tax on land. Right now, land values are skyrocketing, and they're all being absorbed by speculators who contribute nothing to society, driving up the cost of living for the rest of us along the way. All of that could be reversed overnight with a land tax that allowed us to remove all kinds of cumbersome regressive taxes on poor and working class people in the process. We could socialize 10% of the shares of the economy and create a universal citizens' dividend. By essentially giving everyone a 401k, we would create record levels of equality of opportunity, breaking down the divisions between trust fund babies and student loan Gen Zers, without adding a single tax or government department in the process. The citizens' dividend actually has a precursor in the Alaska Permanent Fund, which redistributes oil revenue to give each citizen of Alaska an equal dividend of about $2,000 a year, and was supported by that radical Marxist governor, Sarah Palin. We could put a tiny wealth tax on the top 1% of the population and redistribute it as direct grants to worker cooperatives. By redistributing the capital as cooperative capital, we could massively expand the number of enterprises that are not controlled by the government, but are controlled by the working class. Unlike everything Pierre Poilievre has ever done, that actually would be anti-establishment and pro-working class. The basic message is this: we've had 40 years of neoliberalism and we've seen the results. According to Ipsos, 67% of Canadians say the system is rigged in favor of the rich. If you're not trying to unrig it in favor of the working class, you're right-wing, not conservative, and that's not helping.